I'm Roxanne, 32 years old, and I still remember the day my parents told me I wouldn't be going with them and my sister Lily. They chose her dancing career over me, leaving me in foster care at 12 years old. 16 years later, they showed up at my doorstep, jobless, homeless, and desperate. The look on their faces is something I'll never forget. Before I continue my story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. And if you've ever experienced family betrayal, hit that like and subscribe button. You won't believe how this ends. The neighborhood I grew up in seemed perfectly normal from the outside. Our two-story house in suburban Atlanta had a small front yard where I would play with the neighborhood kids while my sister Lily practiced her dance routines in the living room. My mother, Diana, would watch her with such pride in her eyes, clapping enthusiastically whenever Lily completed a difficult move. My father, James, would film every practice session like he was documenting the early years of a future star. Looking back, I can see the signs were always there. When I turned 8, I received a set of educational books I had mentioned wanting once in passing. That same year, Lily turned 4 and got an elaborate princess-themed birthday party with a custom cake, professional entertainment, and a handmade costume that must have cost a fortune. I told myself it made sense because she was younger and still into kid stuff. I threw myself into school, bringing home straight A's and joining every academic club possible. Maybe if I showed them how smart I was, they would look at me the way they looked at Lily. The day I won the district spelling bee in 5th grade, I rushed home with my trophy only to find an empty house. There was a hastily scribbled note on the kitchen counter. At Lily's dance audition, leftovers in fridge, heat for 2 minutes. My sister's dancing talent emerged early. By age 5, she was already taking private lessons with the most expensive instructor in Atlanta. She's a prodigy, my mother would tell anyone who would listen. The instructor says she's never seen talent like this in someone so young. Our family budget shifted dramatically as more money went toward costumes competition fees and increasingly prestigious dance schools. The financial strain was visible in our lifestyle. The car payments were frequently late. I overheard arguments about credit card bills and second mortgages. Yet somehow there was always money for Lily's dancing. When my shoes had holes, I was told to wait until the next paycheck. When Lily needed new point shoes, they appeared the next day. I became the invisible child. At parent-teacher conferences, my parents seemed surprised by my accomplishments, as if they were hearing about a stranger. "Oh, Roxanne did that," they would say, exchanging glances like they couldn't quite place me in their memories. Meanwhile, our living room walls were covered with Lily's dance photos and trophies. My academic certificates were tucked away in a drawer in my room. My 11th birthday fell on the same weekend as one of Lily's important recitals. I didn't even get a cake that year. "We'll celebrate next weekend," my mother promised, squeezing my shoulder as she rushed around gathering Lily's things. Next weekend never came. When I mentioned it 2 weeks later, my father looked genuinely confused. "Didn't we already do your birthday?" That winter, I first heard them discussing opportunities for Lily. There was a prestigious traveling dance program that accepted a limited number of gifted children each year. The program would take them across the country and eventually to Europe, where they would train with world-class instructors and perform in renowned venues. "It would change her life," my mother whispered to my father late one night when they thought I was asleep. "This could be her ticket to a professional career." "But how would we afford it?" my father asked. "And what about our jobs? What about Roxanne?" The way he said my name, as an afterthought, a complication to be solved, sent a chill through me. Still, I held on to hope that things would improve, that they would remember I was their child too. I tried even harder to be perfect, to require as little attention as possible, while still doing things that might make them proud. I was determined to keep our family together, unaware that the decision to tear it apart had already been set in motion. I remember every detail of that family meeting when I was 12. It was a Sunday afternoon in April, unseasonably warm. My parents had called me into the dining room, the formal one we only used for Thanksgiving and Christmas. Lily wasn't there. She was at a weekend intensive workshop preparing for an upcoming audition. The heavy curtains were drawn, casting the room in an artificial twilight, despite the bright day outside. My mother had arranged herself at the head of the table, hands folded neatly on the polished wood. My father stood behind her, one hand on her shoulder, his expression unreadable behind his glasses. There was a folder on the table between us. "Roxanne, My mother began, her voice carrying that artificial sweetness she used when talking to the parents of Lily's competitors. We have some exciting news. Lily has been accepted into the National Youth Dance Initiative. I nodded, not understanding why this required a formal meeting. Lily was always being accepted into something. It's a traveling program, my father continued, taking over as my mother's eyes darted away from mine. The best instructors in the country. Eventually, international opportunities. That's great, I said, still confused. When does it start? They exchanged a look I've replayed in my mind 1,000 times since, a mixture of guilt and resolution, the face of people who have justified something terrible to themselves. Next month, my mother said. We'll be going with her, of course. She needs parental support. She's only 8. Okay, I said slowly, the first tendril of fear curling in my stomach. So, am I staying with Aunt Patty while you're gone? Another look between them. The program lasts 3 years minimum, my father said, his voice flat. If she progresses as expected, there will be European training after that. The room seemed to tilt slightly. But my school, my friends, I don't understand. My mother opened the folder and pushed a pamphlet toward me. The glossy cover showed young dancers in various poses. This is the opportunity of a lifetime for Lily. We can't afford to take the whole family. Her voice took on an edge of defensiveness. The program subsidizes 1 child and 2 parents. We'd have to pay full price for you plus separate accommodations since the housing is strictly limited. I still remember the exact words that came next. We've arranged for you to stay with Aunt Patty for a while, my father said, and then she'll help connect you with a nice foster family until we get settled somewhere and can send for you. Foster family. The words didn't make sense together. Foster families were for children without parents, without homes. I had both. They were sitting right across from me. You're leaving me behind. My voice sounded very small even to my own ears. Don't be dramatic, Roxanne. My mother sighed. It's not forever, just until we figure things out. You've always been so independent. Lily needs us right now. I spent the next hour offering alternatives. I could stay with school friends. I could get a scholarship to boarding school. I could come along and help with Lily, maybe get a job despite my age to contribute financially. Each suggestion was dismissed with increasingly thin patience. The decision is made, my father finally said, cutting off my desperate negotiations. This is happening. The sooner you accept it, the easier it will be for everyone. I spent that week packing my life into 2 suitcases. My mother helped efficiently sorting through my belongings ruthlessly, designating most items for donation or storage. You won't have much space where you're going, she explained, not meeting my eyes. My last night in my childhood bedroom, I didn't sleep. I lay awake staring at the glow-in-the-dark stars my father had helped me stick to the ceiling years ago, when I was still someone worth spending time with. I wondered what would happen to this room. Would they keep it for me, or would it become storage for Lily's growing collection of trophies and costumes? The drive to Aunt Patty's house the next day was silent. My father kept both hands on the steering wheel, eyes fixed on the road. My mother checked her phone repeatedly, texting updates to Lily's dance instructor. When we arrived, Aunt Patty hugged me tightly, whispering, "It'll be okay, sweetie," in my ear. But I could see the disapproval in her eyes when she looked at my parents. They didn't stay long. There were auditions to prepare for arrangements to be made. The woman from social services arrived as they were leaving. They'd timed it perfectly to avoid any extended awkwardness. The social worker, Ms. Jenkins, had kind eyes and a worn leather portfolio stuffed with papers. "We'll call as often as we can," my mother said, smoothing my hair one last time. "And we'll send for you as soon as we're settled." "It's just temporary," my father added, already edging toward the door. "This is for the family, for Lily's future. You understand that, right?" I didn't answer. I watched from Aunt Patty's front window as they drove away, not looking back. 2 days later, Aunt Patty explained that her small apartment wasn't zoned for additional occupants, and her landlord was already questioning my presence. Ms. Jenkins returned, and I was moved to my first foster placement. My parents called once that week, the conversation strained and brief. They were busy with Lily's orientation. They'd call again soon. The calls became less frequent, then stopped altogether. The occasional postcard arrived. Lily in a stunning costume in New York, Lily performing in Chicago, Lily at a special summer intensive in Miami. The messages were always brief and impersonal. Doing well. Hope you are too. No mention of when I might join them. No real questions about my life. Just evidence that their new life without me was everything they'd hoped for. The Western Heights group home smelled of industrial cleaner and overcooked vegetables. It housed 12 children at any given time, a revolving door of kids waiting for more permanent placements. The walls were institutional beige, the furniture sturdy and unremarkable. My bed was a narrow twin with a plastic-covered mattress that crinkled whenever I moved. "It's just temporary," Ms. Jenkins assured me, the same words my parents had used. I was starting to understand that temporary could mean anything from a few days to forever. I shared a room with 3 other girls. Zoe had been removed from her home due to her mother's drug addiction. Tasha's parents were in prison. Mariana had fled an abusive stepfather. They eyed my suitcases with curiosity when I arrived. "Your stuff's gonna get stolen if you don't hide it," Zoe informed me matter-of-factly on my first night. She helped me find the loose floorboard under my bed, where I could conceal my most precious possessions. The few photos I had of happier times, a bracelet my grandmother had given me before she passed away, and a dog-eared copy of Anne of Green Gables, about another unwanted girl who eventually found her place. 2 months later, I was placed with the Millers, a couple in their 50s who had fostered dozens of children over the years. Their house was chaotic, but warm, with 5 other foster kids ranging in age from 4 to 16. Mrs. Miller tried her best to keep track of everyone's schedules and needs, but with so many children, individual attention was scarce. "Roxanne, did you finish your homework?" she would call out during the nightly head count, but rarely had time to check my work or discuss what I was learning. Mr. Miller was kind, but distant, a man more comfortable fixing bikes in the garage than dealing with emotional preteens. I started at a new school my third that year. I kept to myself, avoiding questions about my family. What could I say? My parents chose my sister over me. They decided I wasn't worth taking along. I developed the skill of making myself forgettable, pleasant enough that I wasn't targeted by bullies, but quiet enough that teachers rarely called on me. Every evening, I checked the Miller's landline for messages. Every mail delivery, I searched for postcards or letters. A postcard from Los Angeles arrived 3 months into my stay. Lily beaming in a professional headshot, her name now stylized as Liliana on the programs. The message, "West Coast tour going well, hope school is good." No return address. The Millers were well-meaning but overwhelmed. When tensions arose between me and one of their long-term foster daughters, they decided it would be best if I moved to a different home. "Some combinations of kids just don't work out," Mrs. Miller explained gently. "It's nothing personal." Nothing personal. The same way abandoning your daughter apparently wasn't personal. My second placement was with the Hendersons, a childless couple in their 40s who ran their home with military precision. Mrs. Henderson was a devout Baptist who believed structure and scripture were the answer to all of life's problems. Mr. Henderson worked nights at a factory and slept during the day, his presence in the house marked mainly by notes about rules we had broken while he was sleeping. "Your soul needs healing," Mrs. Henderson told me after finding me crying in my room one night. "This self-pity is a sin of pride. Your parents made a choice, and God has a plan for you." She made me copy Bible verses about honoring thy father and mother, until my hand cramped. I lasted 6 months with the Hendersons when Mrs. Henderson discovered I'd been keeping a journal detailing my feelings about my parents' abandonment. She confiscated it, calling it dwelling on negativity. The loss of my private thoughts, the one place I could be honest about my pain, was the final straw. I called Ms. Jenkins and asked to be moved. My third placement changed everything. Barbara Reynolds was a single woman in her early 40s who had fostered only a few children over the years. Her modest 3-bedroom home in a quiet neighborhood had a garden in the backyard and bookshelves lining every wall. She worked as a librarian at the local college and had a calm, thoughtful presence that immediately made me feel less on edge. "I've read your file, Roxanne," she said on my first night there, after showing me to a simple but comfortable bedroom that I wouldn't have to share. "I want to be clear about something. What your parents did says nothing about your worth and everything about their limitations. This is your home for as long as you need it to be." It was the first time anyone had directly acknowledged the injustice of my situation, without trying to silverline it or turn it into a life lesson. I broke down sobbing at her kitchen table, releasing months of carefully contained emotions. Barbara simply handed me tissues and waited until I was ready to talk. With Barbara's encouragement, I started seeing a therapist who specialized in abandonment trauma. Dr. Winters helped me understand that my parents' decision reflected their own flaws, not mine. Still knowing something intellectually doesn't immediately heal the emotional wound. I keep checking my email, I admitted during one session when I was 14. I set up a new account and sent it to the last address I had for them, just in case they want to reach me but lost my contact information. Dr. Winters nodded. Hope can be painful in situations like yours. It's normal to want that connection even after everything. The sporadic postcards continued, never with return addresses, always focused on Lily's achievements. I learned they had made it to Europe, Paris, London, Moscow. The messages remained impersonal, as if written to a distant acquaintance. Weather cold here. Lily got the lead role. Taking classes in French now. Barbara helped me develop an identity beyond the girl whose parents left her. She took me to campus events at her college, introduced me to diverse people and ideas, and encouraged my interest in writing. When I joined the school newspaper in ninth grade, she drove me to evening meetings and helped me edit my articles. "You have a voice that deserves to be heard," she told me after my first feature was published. Some people spend their whole lives trying to find that voice. You're already discovering yours. Through these years, I struggled with trust issues that affected my friendships and early romantic relationships. I kept people at a distance, always waiting for them to decide I wasn't worth the effort, just as my parents had. But slowly, with Barbara's consistent support and Dr. Winter's guidance, I began to develop healthier connections. By 16, I had been with Barbara long enough that she suggested becoming my legal guardian. "It wouldn't change much practically," she explained, "but legally, it would give both of us more security." The day we formalized the guardianship, I waited for a call or email from my parents. Surely the social services department had contacted them as part of the process. Nothing came. It was the final confirmation that they had truly moved on from the responsibility of being my parents. That night, Barbara and I had a special dinner to celebrate our official family status. And for the first time, the absence of my biological family didn't overshadow the moment. High school became my proving ground. If my parents thought I wasn't valuable enough to keep, I would show the world and myself that I was worth investing in. I maintained a perfect GPA while working on the school newspaper, eventually becoming editor my junior year. I joined debate club, discovering I had a knack for constructing persuasive arguments and thinking on my feet. Barbara never pushed me toward any particular career, but encouraged exploration. "Follow your curiosities," she would say. "They'll lead you to your passion." My curiosity led me to journalism. There was something powerful about giving voice to stories that might otherwise go untold. Each article I wrote felt like reclaiming narrative control, something I'd lost when my parents rewrote our family story without me in it. During my junior year, I started working weekends at a local coffee shop. The owner, Gina, had been a friend of Barbara's for years and was willing to be flexible around my school schedule. The job taught me more than just how to make the perfect latte. It showed me I could support myself, that independence wasn't just a necessity, but a strength. "You're putting away more than most of my adult employees," Gina commented one day as I deposited most of my paycheck into my savings account. "College fund. Freedom fund," I corrected her. "I never want to be in a position where I have to depend on someone who might disappear." With Barbara's encouragement, I applied for every scholarship I could find. My essay about finding my voice through journalism after family abandonment caught the attention of several selection committees. By spring of my senior year, I had secured enough funding to attend State University with minimal loans. The day my acceptance and scholarship package arrived, Barbara bought champagne sparkling cider for me and invited a small group of my closest friends for a celebration dinner. "To Roxanne," she toasted, raising her glass, "the first foster care student in our district to receive the Presidential Merit Scholarship. Your future is limitless." My graduation ceremony was bittersweet. As I sat in my cap and gown, I couldn't help scanning the audience, some small part of me still hoping to see my parents or even Lily. Barbara must have sensed this because she squeezed my hand and whispered, "I'm so proud of you," pulling my attention back to the moment and the achievement at hand. After the ceremony, I was surrounded by Barbara Gina from the coffee shop Ms. Jenkins, who had stayed in touch long after her professional obligation ended, Dr. Winters, and several friends who had become like family. There were no biological relatives present, but I was far from alone. College opened new worlds for me. I majored in journalism with a minor in psychology, fascinated by the intersection of personal stories and broader social issues. I joined the university newspaper and eventually secured a competitive internship with the city paper the summer after my sophomore year. My first apartment after graduation was a tiny studio, but it was mine. I painted the walls a warm yellow hung art I had carefully selected and filled the bookshelves with volumes that reflected my interests and journey. Barbara helped me find secondhand furniture that we refinished together, turning discarded pieces into treasures, a metaphor that wasn't lost on either of us. "Your first real home," Barbara said, looking around the completed space with tears in her eyes. "Not my first," I corrected her gently. "You gave me my first real home." As my career in digital journalism grew, I continued working with a therapist, now focused less on the initial trauma and more on building a fulfilling future. Dr. Lena Carter specialized in adult children of abandonment and helped me navigate the complex emotions that still surfaced around holidays and milestones. "Grief isn't linear," she reminded me when I expressed frustration at still feeling occasional pangs of loss, despite my successful life. "It's okay to mourn the family you should have had while celebrating the family you've created." My chosen family expanded through my 20s. Close friends who knew my full story and showed up consistently. Colleagues who became confidants. Barbara always my anchor. I learned to trust selectively but deeply, to recognize the difference between people who entered my life as temporary characters and those who were committed to staying through both celebrations and struggles. I dated sometimes successfully, sometimes not. My abandonment issues occasionally sabotaged promising relationships. Either I'd push people away before they could leave, or I'd cling too tightly, suffocating potential connections. But with each experience, I gained better insight into my patterns and gradually developed healthier approaches to intimacy. By 28, I had established myself as a respected digital journalist specializing in human interest stories, particularly those focused on foster care reform and family dynamics. My series on aging out of the foster system won a regional press award and led to speaking engagements at conferences and universities. I had created a life that reflected my values and utilized my experiences as a source of empathy rather than just pain. I had almost stopped looking for my parents. In crowds, had almost stopped wondering if today would be the day they'd try to find me. Almost. The knock came at 7:43 on a Tuesday evening in October. I remember checking the time because I was waiting for a delivery dinner from my favorite Thai restaurant. I'd had a long day finishing a difficult article about cuts to social services funding and their impact on vulnerable families. When I opened the door, the past crashed into my present with such force that for several seconds I couldn't process what I was seeing. Three people stood in my building's hallway, illuminated by the fluorescent overhead lights that made everyone look sickly. An older couple, the woman's once blonde hair now gray and thin, the man gaunt with deep lines carved around his mouth, and behind them, a younger woman with familiar eyes. "Roxanne." My mother said, her voice exactly as I remembered, yet somehow diminished. "You're so grown up." I gripped the doorframe, grateful for its solid support. 16 years. 16 years since they had driven away from Aunt Patty's house. No warning, no recent contact. Just suddenly here, standing at my door as if they had every right to be part of my life. "How did you find me?" The question came out automatically, my journalist's instinct for information overriding the emotional turmoil. "Your article," my father said, holding up a printout of my foster care series that had been published in a national online magazine. "Your bio mentioned the city. We found you on social media after that." I noticed then how worn their clothes looked. My mother's coat had frayed cuffs. My father's shoes were scuffed beyond what regular wear would cause. Behind them, Lily, no Liliana now, shifted uncomfortably, her once confident posture now curled inward. May we come in? My mother asked, a tremor in her voice. Just to talk, please. Some detached part of me observed my own response with fascination. I stepped aside, allowing these strangers who had once been my family to enter my home. The home I had built without them, for them. My apartment suddenly seemed smaller with them in it. They sat awkwardly on my sofa, a beautiful mid-century piece Barbara had helped me restore. I remained standing, arms crossed, creating distance and protection. You look well. My father offered, his eyes darting around my apartment, taking in the awards framed on the wall, the bookshelf full of volumes, the obvious signs of a successful life. Really well. Why are you here? I asked, cutting through the small talk. 16 years had earned me the right to directness. They exchanged a look, that same conspiratorial glance I remembered from the day they told me I wouldn't be going with them. Some things never changed. Things haven't gone as planned, my mother began carefully. Liliana, had a good run. Several years with prominent companies. Lily spoke for the first time, her voice softer than I remembered. I danced with the Chicago Contemporary for 3 seasons, then the Boston Academy Company. But I injured my knee 5 years ago. It never fully recovered to professional standard. We invested everything in her career, my father continued. Second mortgages, retirement funds. It was supposed to pay off when she reached principal dancer status. But then the injury, my mother added quickly. No one could have predicted that. I looked at Lily, this sister who had been elevated above me, whose potential had been deemed more valuable than my actual presence. She avoided my gaze, studying her hands instead. She looked exhausted in a bone-deep way that went beyond physical tiredness. We've been struggling for a while, my father admitted. Lost the condo in Chicago last year. Been staying with friends, but… He trailed off. The unspoken request hung in the air between us. They were homeless, jobless, desperate. And they had come to me, the daughter they had discarded, for help. We saw you're doing well, my mother said, gesturing to my apartment. Your career seems to be thriving. We're so proud of what you've accomplished. Proud. The word landed like a slap. What right did they have to pride in achievements they had no part in nurturing? Where have you been living? I asked, ignoring the claim of pride. With friends, like Dad said, Lily answered when our parents hesitated. But we've exhausted everyone's goodwill. No one wants 3 adults on their couch indefinitely. I've been picking up odd jobs, my father added. Construction mainly. Your mother's been cleaning houses. Lily's been waitressing when her knee allows. My mother leaned forward, her expression earnest. We know this is a shock. We know we have no right to ask anything of you. But we're desperate, Roxanne. We just need a temporary place to regroup. A few weeks to find jobs, save for a security deposit. There it was again. Temporary. The word they had used when leaving me behind. The word that had stretched into years, then decades. The audacity of it struck me like a physical blow. Temporary. I repeated the word, bitter on my tongue, like my temporary stay in foster care. My mother flinched. My father looked away. Only Lily met my eyes, something like recognition flickering across her face. It wasn't supposed to be permanent, my mother whispered. We really did plan to send for you once we were settled. When? I demanded. After a year, 5 years, you never even called to check if I was safe. Do you have any idea what happened to me after you left? The doorbell rang. My forgotten dinner delivery, breaking the tension momentarily. As I paid the delivery person, I sent a quick text to Barbara. They're here. My parents and Lily. At my apartment. Need backup. Barbara's response was immediate. On my way, 20 minutes. You've got this. When I returned to the living room, I found my father examining my press award. National recognition, he commented, in an attempt at normalcy. You've really made something of yourself. No thanks to you, I replied, setting down the bag of food I no longer had any appetite for. I made something of myself despite you. The silence that followed was deafening. The tension in my apartment was thick enough to cut. My mother sat perched on the edge of my sofa, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. My father had taken to pacing the small space, examining my possessions, as if they might offer some insight into the person I had become without them. Lily remained unnaturally still, watching the unfolding scene with wide eyes. 16 years, I said, finally breaking the strained silence. 16 years without a phone call, a real letter, anything more than tourist postcards with no return address. And now you show up expecting what open arms for me to welcome you into the life I built after you threw me away. We didn't throw you away, my mother protested, but the defense sounded hollow even to her ears. It was a difficult decision made for the family's future. I was family. The words burst out of me, years of suppressed emotion behind them. I was your child. Parents don't leave children behind for dance recitals and European tours. My father stopped his pacing. You don't understand the opportunity Lily had. It was once in a lifetime. So was having 2 daughters, I shot back. But you decided only one was worth keeping. Lily winced at this, her eyes filling with tears. Roxanne, I didn't know. They told me you chose to stay with Aunt Patty, that you didn't want to travel. They said you preferred stability and your school friends. I stared at her, processing this new information. You thought I chose to be left behind. She nodded miserably. They said you were happier without us, that you were thriving with a normal life while I had to deal with constant travel and pressure. I envied you. A bitter laugh escaped me. Envied me. I spent 2 years bouncing between foster homes because Aunt Patty couldn't keep me. I changed schools 3 times in 2 years. I learned to hide my belongings so they wouldn't get stolen, and to never get too comfortable anywhere, because it could all change overnight. My parents exchanged guilty glances, the kind of silent communication developed over decades of partnership. It infuriated me that they could still have that intimacy, while I had been denied even basic contact. We made mistakes. My father conceded, the admission clearly difficult for him. We thought we were doing what was best at the time. Best for who? I demanded. Best for Lily's career. Best for your ambitions for her. It certainly wasn't best for me, and from the looks of it, it wasn't actually best for any of you either. My mother's face crumpled. We lost everything. The dance company closed after the economic downturn. Lily's injury required surgeries we couldn't afford. We refinanced the condo until the bank took it. The car got repossessed last year. I'm sorry that happened to you, I said, surprising myself with the sincerity behind the words. But that doesn't explain or excuse 16 years of absence from my life. Pride, my father admitted after a long pause. At first we thought it really would be temporary. Then months turned into a year, then 2. The longer we went without contacting you properly, the harder it became to face what we'd done. It was easier to pretend you were fine, that you understood our choice, that one day we'd make it up to you when Lily was established and successful. And when that didn't happen, I pressed. Shame, my mother whispered. How could we come back and admit we had sacrificed our relationship with you for something that ultimately fell apart? What kind of parents would that make us? The kind who abandoned their child, I stated flatly. Which is exactly what you are, regardless of how Lily's career turned out. The doorbell rang again. Barbara. Relief flooded through me at the thought of her steady presence. Barbara took in the scene with one sweeping glance as she entered. Though she had never met my parents, she had seen enough photos to recognize them immediately. Her expression remained neutral, but I could see the tension in her posture. You must be Barbara, my mother said, rising to offer her hand. The guardian. I'm the person who was here for Roxanne when you weren't, Barbara replied evenly, ignoring the outstretched hand. For birthdays, graduations, broken hearts, and achievements. For everyday moments and life-changing ones. My father stepped forward. We appreciate what you've done for our daughter. Your daughter? Barbara's eyebrow rose. You surrendered that title when you left her at 12. She's been my family for much longer than she was yours. I had never seen Barbara so fiercely protective, and the surge of love I felt for her in that moment nearly overwhelmed me. We made a terrible mistake, my mother said, tears now flowing freely. We know that now. We're not asking for forgiveness or even understanding. Just help, please. We have nowhere else to go. Barbara looked to me, her expression softening. This is your decision, Roxanne. Whatever you choose, I support you. But remember what Dr. Carter told you about boundaries and self-protection. I took a deep breath, centering myself before responding. I can't have you living here, I told my parents firmly. That's not an option. Their faces felt desperation evident. But, I continued, I can help you find temporary housing through the community assistance program I've worked with for my articles. And I have connections at several publications and businesses that might have job openings. You do that for us. My father looked genuinely surprised. After everything, I'm not doing it for you, I clarified. I'm doing it because it's the kind of person I've worked to become. Someone who helps people in need even when they don't deserve it. And because cutting you off entirely would hurt me more in the long run than establishing careful boundaries. Lily spoke up, her voice small. Could I have a relationship with you again? Get to know each other as adults? I studied my sister's face. She had been a child when all this happened. Not the architect of the abandonment, but its beneficiary. Still, years of silence had passed when she could have reached out. We can try, I said cautiously. Separately from them. If you want to know me, it will have to be as an individual, not as part of a package deal. My parents' disappointed expressions revealed they had hoped for more. Perhaps a full family reconciliation, immediate forgiveness, or at minimum a place to stay. But they were in no position to protest the limited help I was offering. We'll take any assistance you're willing to provide, my mother said quietly. And maybe with time. I cut her off before she could plant seeds of expectations I wasn't prepared to meet. This isn't the beginning of a normal parent-child relationship. That opportunity ended when you drove away 16 years ago. I'm offering practical help because I cannot, because I'm reclaiming my role as your daughter. Barbara squeezed my shoulder gently, a silent affirmation of my boundaries. My parents nodded, defeated but desperate enough to accept my terms. I'll make some calls tomorrow, I told them. For tonight, I'll pay for a motel room. You need to be gone in 15 minutes. As they gathered themselves to leave, Lily lingered behind momentarily. For what it's worth, she whispered, I missed having a sister every single day. Even when I didn't know the truth, I felt your absence. I didn't know what to do with that information, whether it was a comfort or just another form of pain. But I nodded acknowledgement of her words as she followed our parents out the door. When they were gone, I collapsed onto my sofa, emotionally drained. Barbara sat beside me, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. You did beautifully, she said. Perfect boundaries. I'm so proud of you. They looked so pathetic, I whispered. Not at all like the powerful figures in my memories. People rarely do when we face them as adults, Barbara replied wisely, especially when they've fallen from the pedestals they once occupied in our minds. As the reality of the evening settled over me, I realized this wasn't the end of something but the beginning of a new phase, one where I held the power and made the choices. It was terrifying and liberating all at once. The following months unfolded in ways I never could have predicted. True to my word, I helped my parents find temporary housing through a community assistance program I had profiled for an article. The program provided subsidized apartments for families transitioning from homelessness with the requirement that residents actively seek employment and meet regularly with caseworkers. I used my professional connections to help them find jobs. Nothing glamorous but stable work that matched their skills. My father was hired as a maintenance worker at a local university, thanks to a recommendation from Barbara's colleague. My mother found work as an administrative assistant at a nonprofit organization, where I had previously volunteered. They were humble positions compared to their previous careers, but they offered steady paychecks and the dignity of self-sufficiency. Our contact remained limited and structured. I met them once a month for coffee in a neutral location, a cafe near my office where the public setting helped maintain emotional boundaries. Our conversations were strained at first, filled with awkward pauses and careful navigation around painful subjects. You seem to have a good support system, my mother observed during one such meeting 3 months after their reappearance. Barbara, your colleagues, your friends. I built that system myself, I replied. I had to learn early on who was trustworthy and who would actually show up. The implied criticism wasn't lost on them. My father shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "We know we can never make up for what we did," he said, "but we're grateful for any relationship you're willing to have with us now." I studied them across the table, these aging, humbled versions of the parents who had once seemed so formidable. The strange thing about abandonment is that while the abandoned person grows and evolves through the experience, the abandoner remains frozen in time in the victim's mind. Seeing them now diminished and dependent required a mental adjustment I was still working through with my therapist. "I'm not doing this out of obligation," I told them honestly. "I'm doing it because harboring resentment hurts me more than it hurts you. But genuine forgiveness, if it comes, will take time." My relationship with Lily developed along a different path. As promised, I met with her separately from our parents. Our first solo meeting was at a small park near my apartment, a neutral ground, where we sat on adjacent benches watching ducks on the pond. "I don't even know where to begin," she admitted, fidgeting with the sleeve of her sweater. "There are 16 years between us." "Start with what happened after I was left behind," I suggested. I only got the postcards version, and Lily's story emerged gradually over several meetings. The prestigious dance program had indeed opened doors, but the cost had been high. Grueling training schedules, constant competition, the pressure of carrying our parents' financial and emotional investment. While I had been fighting for stability in foster care, she had been losing her childhood to rehearsals and performances. "I developed an eating disorder at 14, she confessed during our third meeting. "Mom and Dad never acknowledged it. They'd just say I was dedicated to maintaining my dancer's physique. They were blind to a lot of things," I observed, finding unexpected common ground in our separate sufferings. "When my knee gave out," Lily continued, "it wasn't just a career ending. It was like my entire purpose for existing disappeared overnight. All those years of sacrifice, yours and mine, suddenly for nothing." I was struck by her acknowledgement of my sacrifice alongside her own. It was the first time anyone in my biological family had recognized what had been taken from me. As our cautious sisterhood rebuilt, Barbara remained my rock. She never pushed me toward reconciliation, but supported my choices while helping me maintain healthy boundaries. "Remember," she would remind me, "healing doesn't mean you have to give them unrestricted access to your life or emotions. You can acknowledge the past while protecting your present." 6 months after my parents' reappearance, I invited Barbara to join one of our coffee meetings. I wanted these two parts of my life to intersect at least briefly, my past and the woman who had helped me build my future. The meeting was tense but civilized. My parents thanked Barbara for being there for me, their gratitude awkward but seemingly genuine. "I didn't do it for you," Barbara told them directly. "I did it because Roxanne deserved someone who recognized her value. She's an extraordinary person, and I've been fortunate to have her in my life." My mother wiped away tears at this. "We missed so much," she whispered. "Yes," Barbara agreed simply. "You did." The foundation to support foster children pursuing higher education grew from my experiences. Using my journalism platform and connections, I established a small scholarship fund that grew through community support and eventually corporate sponsorship. Each year, we provided financial assistance to students aging out of the foster system who wanted to attend college or vocational training. Barbara served on the board alongside me, and to my surprise, Lily eventually volunteered to help with fundraising events, using her connections from her dancing days to secure donations and publicity. "It feels right," she explained when I questioned her motives, "like making something positive from our story." My professional success continued to grow. The series I wrote about families fractured by economic pressures and desperate choices won a national award. I carefully avoided directly mining my own story for professional gain, but my personal experience informed my empathetic approach to difficult subjects. Therapy remained an essential part of my journey. Dr. Carter helped me navigate the complex emotions that surfaced with my family's return. "Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or even reconciliation," she reminded me during a particularly difficult session after a tense interaction with my parents. "It's about releasing yourself from the burden of resentment. It's for you, not for them." Slowly, I came to understand that the family I had lost would never be the family I had longed for all those years. My parents were flawed people who had made a terrible decision they couldn't undo. Lily was both victim and beneficiary of their misguided priorities, and I was no longer the abandoned 12-year-old desperately waiting for their return. 2 years after their reappearance, my parents had established a modest but stable life. They had moved from the transitional housing to a small apartment of their own, maintained steady employment, and developed a fragile relationship with me based on my terms and boundaries. It wasn't close or comfortable, but it was honest, perhaps for the first time. The greatest gift of this difficult journey was the clarity it brought about what family truly means. Family isn't defined by blood or legal obligation. It's created through consistent love, support, and presence. Barbara was more family to me than the people who shared my DNA. The friends who had stood by me through difficult times were family. My chosen connections had proven stronger and more nurturing than the accident of birth. This understanding freed me from the last chains of abandonment. I no longer needed my biological family's approval or love to feel whole. I had built a life rich with genuine connections, meaningful work, and the knowledge that I was worthy of love simply because I existed, not because of achievements or potential or usefulness to others' dreams. On my 32nd birthday, Barbara hosted a gathering of my closest friends. My parents weren't invited. That boundary remained important. But Lily came bringing a thoughtfully selected book of essays she knew I'd enjoy. As I looked around at the faces of those who had chosen to be part of my life, who showed up consistently with love and support, I felt a profound sense of peace. The abandoned child inside me would always exist, but she no longer drove my decisions or defined my worth. To family, Barbara toasted, raising her glass. The one we make, the one we choose, the one that chooses us back every single day. Family. Not determined by blood, but by love. Not a static gift of birth, but a dynamic creation of consistent care. Not perfect, but perfectly real. I had lost one family and gained another more authentic one. And in that exchange, painful as it was, I had found my true home. Have you ever had to redefine what family means to you? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If my story resonated with you in any way, please subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear that family is about who chooses to stay, not who happens to share your DNA. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember, you are worthy of consistent love, regardless of who failed to recognize that in the past.